Hello, I'm Frances Deegan Horowitz, President of the City University Graduate Center. Welcome to Women, a series of programs for and about us. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Elaine Bartlett, political activist, mother of 4, grandmother of 3. For 16 years, she was an inmate at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. Her crime, delivering 4 ounces of cocaine upstate into the waiting hands of a police informant. It was her first offense, her sentence, 20 years to life. Her story, life before prison, her life behind bars, clemency by Governor George Pataki during the Christmas season of 1999, and her reentry into her family's life, is the subject of journalist Jennifer Gonnerman's remarkable and riveting book, Life on the Outside, The Prison Odyssey of Elaine Bartlett. It's just been published by Farrar Straus Giroux. This book is as much an examination of the prison system as it is a story of one woman and her family. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Harlem all my life. I grew up in 139th Street, Wagner Projects. I lived in the Bronx for a period of time. But basically, we always came back to Manhattan.
And when this story begins, you are working in a beauty salon.
Yes, I was 26 years old. I was on welfare, a mother of 4, and I was living in Wagner Projects, paying $127 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. I was working off the books at a beauty parlor on 125th Street because my girlfriend had her license and she had her own booth, and she was training me. And at that time is when I met George Dietz. And at first he kept asking me to get involved and deliver a package for him, and I kept saying no. And then it was around Thanksgiving month was coming, and I agreed to do so, not thinking that he was going to use me as a patsy to set me up to get out of his own troubles.
I mean, the character of George Dietz, I mean, he's the villain of this book in many ways, because he knowingly put you in the position of being caught by the police. I mean, it was a case almost of entrapment. And was that ever used in the defense?
That was never used in defense, and entrapment is a very hard thing to fight because it's a two-pawn law.
There's a what?
A two-pawn law.
Two-pawn law.
Yes, entrapment, because in one sense, the law is saying that they can't entrap you, and in another sense, when they use informers, they can entrap you. So it's a no-win situation, and it's a very hard thing to prove. Even though everything in my case showed that it was an entrapment case, I didn't know anyone from Albany. I had never been to Albany a day before in my life. George Dietz rented the hotel rooms. He picked me up from the train and took me to this hotel room. So everything was already set up before we even got there.
And the person who went with you, who's now your husband, Nathan?
Nathan Brooks, he received a 25 to life sentence because of his prior convictions. It had nothing to do with the case, because they knew that he didn't know George Dietz. Everything came out in trial that he didn't know George Dietz and them. When they first went to my apartment, he didn't let them in. So he had no knowledge of them or even knew them as individuals.
And he didn't want you to go?
No, he didn't want me to go.
And as we are taping today, Nathan himself is getting out of prison.
Yes, this morning Nathan is waiting in Greenhaven to be released, so he should be released in a couple of hours.
When you were arrested and charged, you had the choice of doing a plea bargain.
Well, they offered me a plea bargain, but the plea bargain that they offered me was a 5 to life, and if I was to come back to Manhattan and become an informer. My problem with that was, who was I going to set up? I didn't know any kingpins, and the people that they probably would have had me set up would have been similar people like myself, people who really wasn't involved in drugs or kingpins, just someone, you know, to use to get a statistic or to come up with numbers for cases. And Nathan wanted to take the 5 to life if they would have let me go, but they didn't want to release me. So he didn't take the father to life either.
And so you both went to trial.
Yes, we both went to trial. I received a 20-year life sentence for first-time offender. When I got arrested, I had $5 in my pocket. There was nothing in my lifestyle or that I owned or anything to show that I was a kingpin. And I couldn't believe that the judge actually gave me that type of time. I was a mother of 4 on welfare. I had no education. And basically, they did a background check, and I had never been in trouble with the law before, so I couldn't understand why he gave me a 20-year life sentence. I felt like I was being railroaded out of my life.
But did you know anything about the Rockefeller Laws at that time?
At that time, I didn't know anything about the Rockefeller drug laws except for what I was reading in the books, and I really didn't understand it because that's not something that we're taught in our communities or that we learn in school. That's not something that we're educated on. And the Rockefeller drug laws came into effect when I was 15 years old in 1973.
And it was never discussed in the community in terms of what it meant?
No, not at all.
And did the judge have any leeway? Could he have sentenced you to less, given the Rockefeller laws?
He could have gave me a 15 to life sentence, which would have been the minimum I could have received after blowing trial.
And if you'd gotten 15 to life, how early would you have been eligible for parole?
I would have got out 1998.
So it would have been 1 year earlier?
Yeah, actually, because I received clemency in 1999.
Right. Wouldn't have helped much.
No, it wouldn't have.
And then you went to Bedford Hills.
I went to Bedford Hills, and for a first-time offender, I had never been in trouble with the law, so I'd never been locked up. I'd never been incarcerated. I've been to prison all my life, visiting other relatives and boyfriends and stuff. But for a woman and a mother to be locked up and to actually go through them gates and know that this is the reality, that you're going to be here for 20 years, that was very hard for me to accept. I was never able to really accept the time. I lived in 2 worlds, the incarceration world as far as being locked up and being in Bedford and doing everything in Bedford I can to keep a sane mind. And then I created another world in the visiting room with my children because the visits was the most important thing to me. And having my family be there and coming to see me was what kept me alive and kept me going for the 16 years. And we tend to develop 2 worlds because when you come down to the visiting room, you don't really tell them what you're enduring and what you're going through on a daily basis in prison because you want to make the visit as happy as possible. And the family does the same thing because my mother used to tell the kids, don't go up there worrying your mother. She's doing the 20 life sentence. There's nothing she could do about what's going on here. So just go up there, enjoy the visit, tell her everything's fine. Don't go up there worrying her, telling her about the problems or the chaotic. Just keep her strong. And it's good in a way, but then in another way it's sad. Because when I came home after 16 years, when Governor Pataki gave me clemency, that was the happiest day of my life until I came home. And when I came home and put that key in the door and opened the door, I basically found that my family had created their own prison out here in the free world. And they didn't have any type of intervention that went into the household that helped them to deal with my mother dying of dialysis. I had a brother that died of the virus. I had a sister that was dying at the time and in the living room. And they didn't know how to deal with her. They only knew that they loved her and they was happy that she was off the street and home.
Your children were how old when you went to prison?
When I went to prison, my children were 9, 6, 2, and 1. So my mother basically raised my children.
It was lucky that your mother was there.
Yes, because a lot of women are not that fortunate and their kids go into foster care.
Right. So she kept the family together.
My mother was the root of the family.
A strong woman.
Yeah, a very strong woman. And she kept the family together. The hardest part for me was going to her bedside at the hospital and telling her I understand that she's tired. I understand that she couldn't take it no more and that she can go. You know, that everything's going to be all right. For me, that was my worst nightmare come to light, because I always feared the fact that my mother would die before I made it back out to society, and that became a reality for me. And I thought that was going to be the breaking point where I was going to actually lose it.
But while you were in prison, you studied?
Yes, I got my GED. I got my associate's degree. I got credits towards my bachelor's. And then Governor Pataki finally gave me clemency in 1999.
Why did he give you clemency, do you think?
Well, he basically gave me clemency because I sold my soul. I mean, basically, you have to get, we don't have the, in our communities, we don't have the backing, or we don't know anybody out here that's going to fight for us and be active for us to come out after doing such a long period of time. So basically, you have to connect with people. And Laura Tucker, a woman who came into the prison and was working at the time with Women Care, she started advocating for me to get clemency.
And it was her advocacy, you think, that?
It was her advocacy and her strength and her believing in me as an individual and not judging me because of the fact that I was doing a 20 life sentence under the Rockefeller drug laws.
And you became a leader in prison.
Yes, I did. We basically took Women Care and made it an empowerment group, and we started getting all the women to fight for themselves, to write their stories, to talk to their family members, have them go out and meet with Randy Credicle, and he works for the Consular Fund. And we started having rallies and vigils and basically putting a human face to the statistics.
And when you came out and went home, as you said, you put the key in the door and you found essentially a family in disarray.
A family that basically, they were struggling just to hold on. Their whole world had crushed around them. Everybody was angry. It was a lot of displaced anger. They had love for each other. That's what, I guess, kept them together so long. But it was a lot of trials and tribulations that they went through, that no one had any counseling, no intervention went into the household. And I had no understanding about that because I had other agencies. When my mother became ill and couldn't make it up there with the kids, people were going into my household to bring the children to see me. So there was outside activity going into the household. And even if they didn't work in that field, they could have recommended or sent someone in there that could help the situation. So that bothered me a lot. It made me become very angry about the situation, but then I knew I couldn't give up, and I knew that I had grown in a way that my family had not grown out in society, and I knew that I had to find a way to try to rebuild my family and basically pick up the pieces and try to put it together, and I'm still working on that today.
So what was the first thing you did?
The first thing I did, my daughter-in-law gave me $1,500, and I hadn't had that type of money in my hand, and God knows when. So the first thing I did, she took me to Costco's, and I spent $800 and something on food, cleaning supplies, a toilet seat cover, just trying to fix up the house and make it a little more livable conditions for everybody, to try to get everybody to care about, you know, life, and to know that it's going to be all right, that we can pick up from here and go on. But that lasted about a month or two. It didn't last very long.
And then what happened?
And then I left, and I was trying to get shelter for me and my children, but I ran into other obstacles because my children were so old. They didn't feel that it was an emergency. They wanted to put me in a shelter and not me, a family shelter for me and my children. Even though I was released to the project apartment by Pataki, given clemency, I basically was told by housing that I had no right to speak up about the conditions of the apartment or to try to get a bigger apartment for us to live in, because I was a felony convicted and I wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. So if I didn't want my family put out, then to basically just be quiet and accept it. So I faced a lot of different obstacles when I came home after 16 years of being released. In some states, you can't even get welfare or food stamps. You can get no assistance. We can't live in public housing. We can't vote. We can't get Pell Grants. So really it's 90% against us when we come back out to society. And I'm not a hardcore criminal. If you was to see me walking down the street, you wouldn't cross the street feeling threatened or look at me and say, oh, there's Elaine Bartlett, she's a convicted felon. She did 20 years under the Rockefeller drug law, let me not walk next to her. So it's not a reality. And most of us, we educate ourselves, we stay strong in prison, and we do the best that we can so that when we do come back out to society, we can be a productive citizen and stay out in society and rebuild our lives with our families. When I came out, I went on 52 interviews. I could have got disgusted and discouraged, and it wasn't that I wasn't qualified for the interviews that I went on, because I always made it to the second interview. Basically, every time the felony conviction came up and I was honest and said, yes, I just got released, I did 16 years under the Rockefeller drug law, then it was, okay, we'll call you, and you would never get that call. Eventually, I went to South 40, and because they paid the first 6 months half of my salary, that's how I got a job at Project Renew. And
South 40 is an organization that helps people who have come out of prison.
Yes, and that's basically how I landed my first job, and I worked there for 3 years.
And what about your children? I mean, your oldest son.
My oldest son, Apache.
He's the kind of one. He kind of held the family together after your mother died.
Yes, him and my baby sister Michelle Marcus. And basically, Apache had a scholarship, and he went away to basketball school. Once my mother became real ill, he came back home, and he never went back. And since then, he's been coaching, and he runs an organization called the Better Life Foundation for children, and he helps them to get scholarships and to get away to college and stuff.
And your other children?
My son Jamel is incarcerated again. He's in Franklin, and he's doing a 5-year flat. When I came home, I had to go visit Jamel in prison. He was on Rikers Island, and basically he was in SHU. He was being locked down 23 hours a day. Mel has really been through a lot. At the age of 12, Mel started running the streets and getting into trouble and getting involved with drugs and stuff. And you would think that with your mother doing the 20 life sentence for drugs, that would deter you. But it doesn't. Because in our communities, our kids basically have nothing to do, and it's easy for them to go out into the streets and get caught up.
Of all of your 4 children, he, at least in the book, comes across as the child who is the angriest and the most affected by your incarceration.
He is, and my youngest daughter, Janae, who's named after me, Elaine. Janae is 22, and basically we have a love and hate relationship. She loves me, but she hates me for doing anything to be taken away from her and her sisters and brothers. She feels that if she was a mother and she had children, she would never do anything to be taken away. And I tried to explain to her where I was at the age of 26, what was going on in my life, and that I made a bad decision. And I paid for that. You know, I've been home 4 years now, and I'm not going to keep paying for the same thing I already did. I felt that 16 years, that my crime didn't warrant 16 years in the first place. I felt that it didn't take me 16 years to learn my lesson. I felt that it was so many other things that they could have did with me. They could have put me under house arrest. They could have put a bracelet under my ankle. They could have had me do community service. They could have put me on probation. They could have educated me so I could have been a better mother for my children. I don't feel justified in doing 16 years for my crime, a first-time offender, a nonviolent crime. I feel that there's so many other things that could have been done with me. They spent over $500,000 to house me for 16 years. That money could have put my family through college and so many other families. So I just think that the taxpayer money is really being wasted in that sense. And when you talk about rehabilitation, we all make mistakes in our life. And yeah, I deserve to be punished, but what type of punishment did I deserve? Did I deserve 16 years? I mean, I did 16 years in Bedford, and I didn't meet not one kingpin. So these laws were created to do away with the kingpins, and that's not the population that's being affected. The population that's being affected is poor and Hispanic like myself.
And Now you are part of the movement to try to get the drug law, the Rockefeller drug laws, repealed and modified.
Yes, and I've been working in that capacity even before coming out of prison, and I'm still working in that capacity. Governor Pataki has been talking about doing away with these laws since he stepped into office. That's basically been his meal ticket. And he gave me clemency, but he only put a Band-Aid on the problem. You haven't resolved the problem. And now they're having committees up in Albany reviewing the drug laws, and we are hoping, and we put a committee together called Real Reform for 2004. And this is basically all organizations that has been fighting to change these laws for so many years, that we really want to see these laws change. And we have 6 points that we definitely want to see take place. Retroactive.
What do you mean by retroactive?
When I say retroactive, whatever they do with the laws, the people that are already incarcerated, to make sure that they're affected by whatever changes be made. Because basically they have already done more than enough time under the Rockefeller drug laws. Reduction of sentencing, treatment, and to make sure that they understand that it's cheaper to give treatment than it is to house somebody. Taxpayers' money could be better spent on educating people. The drug problem is like a mental health problem or a health issue. You know, people that are addicted to drugs, it's a problem. The same way with alcohol or anything else, and it needs to be treated as so.
And where are you now in terms of what you're doing and your children?
Well, with my children, I'm not going to give up on my children or my family. Basically, without them, I wouldn't have survived the 16 years of being incarcerated. And they kept me strong, so now that I'm out here and I'm able to stand up on my own 2 feet, I'm going to be strong for them. And I know eventually it'll come together and they'll get it together. My 22-year-old daughter, Danae, I'm not going to give up on her because I know that she's capable of doing better with her life. I don't want to see her incarcerated. I don't want to have to go to prison to see her. And if I give up on her, she hasn't given up on me on the 16 years of coming to see me, even though she was angry with me for them 16 years. So I cannot give up on her. And basically everything that my mother did and everything that my mother endured in trying to keep the family together, I have to follow in her footsteps today. And I have to try to rebuild the family and stop the vicious cycle of incarceration and drugs and the effects that it have on our community. Not only will I help my family, but I will help so many others. And that's why I agreed to the book Life on the Outside. That's why the book has so much meaning to me, because I feel that this is an educational tool. I would like to see it used in colleges as a psychology book. I feel that anyone that's working with families and in our communities need to utilize this book to educate themselves and to help them deal with the communities better.
How did you meet Jennifer Gunnerman, and when did you decide to let her into your life as fully as you did?
When Jennifer came into my life, she came into my life at a time where my mother had just died. I had basically was very depressed. I hadn't combed my hair in maybe 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. When they called me for the interview, everyone had already told me, Elaine, get dressed up, put on makeup, go down there looking good. I did not. I rolled out of bed, brushed my teeth, washed my face, went down there with my green uniform on, didn't comb my hair, didn't make any effort to make my appearance look good. I looked at bad, real bad. And I looked at basically how I felt. And I felt that once she interviewed me and she actually heard me, Elaine Bartlett, because you always judge people by your first appearance of people. The first impression is what holds the longest. And I felt if that woman could look beyond all this and actually hear me and hear what I'm saying and understand me and where I'm coming from, then this is the woman that I want to be writing about me.
Well, it's a very compelling book, and congratulations for letting her do this and for really trying to communicate what all of this means to people who've never touched any of these systems. And I wish you a lot of good luck from here on in, especially as you reunite with your husband, and I'm sure you're going to be a great help to him in trying to, you know what it is to adjust to coming out of prison, and I'm sure you'll be there strong for him. And I'm sorry, but we're out of time. My thanks to Elaine Bartlett for joining me. Life on the Outside. The Prison Odyssey of Elaine Bartlett has just been published by Farrar Straus Giroux. For the City University Graduate Center and Women to Women, I'm Frances Deegan Horowitz.